At my grandson's lavish 5th birthday party, my daughter-in-law whispered to a guard. They dragged me out, calling me a tacky old woman while my son laughed with guests. I just smiled, holding my grandson's gift. They don't know I own the company funding their entire life. Tomorrow, things change. Listen to my story, like, share, and tell me where you're listening from. The grand ballroom of the Peninsula Chicago shimmered under the crystal chandeliers, a cascade of gold and white balloons adorning every corner. Tables laden with exotic fruits and gourmet pastries glittered, a testament to the lavish expense. Eleanor Vance stood just inside the arched doorway, a simple, elegant woman in a tailored navy dress, a carefully wrapped gift tucked under her arm. Her heart swelled with a quiet joy as she scanned the joyous chaos, searching for her grandson, Leo. It was his 5th birthday, and she had been looking forward to this day for months. Then, across the room, she saw her, Serena Hayes, her daughter-in-law, a vision in a designer silk jumpsuit, her laugh tinkling like expensive glass as she chatted with a group of impeccably dressed women. Serena's eyes, sharp and dismissive, found Eleanor. A flicker of something cold crossed Serena's face, a familiar disdain, before she subtly nodded towards Eleanor and whispered something to a young security guard standing nearby. The guard, a fresh-faced man barely out of his teens, straightened his uniform and began to make his way towards Eleanor. Eleanor felt a knot tighten in her stomach, a premonition she had grown accustomed to over the years. The young guard approached her hesitantly, his expression apologetic. "Ma'am," he began, his voice barely audible above the children's excited squeals. "I'm terribly sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is a private event." Eleanor's eyebrows lifted slightly. "I assure you, young man, I am Eleanor Vance. I am Leo's grandmother." She offered a small, reassuring smile, trying to ease the boy's clear discomfort. Before the guard could respond, Serena's voice, now sharper and louder, cut through the din. "No, she's not an invited guest, officer. Please escort her out." Serena didn't even bother to look at Eleanor, her gaze fixed on the laughing children. But her words were like a slap, cold and public. A murmur rippled through the nearest guests. The guard, now visibly distressed, looked from Serena to Eleanor, then back to Serena. "But ma'am," she said. Serena stepped closer, her tone dripping with mock sweetness, but her eyes were flint. She then switched languages, her voice suddenly crisp. Cutting. "Por favor, retire esa mujer velha brega daqui. Ella no pertence a este lugar." She spoke in flawless Portuguese, a language Eleanor understood perfectly, thanks to a year spent abroad in her youth. A tacky old woman. The words echoed in Eleanor's mind, sharp and deliberately humiliating. Serena hadn't needed to switch languages for the guard, who clearly didn't understand. She had done it for the benefit of the surrounding guests, many of whom were indeed Brazilian, and exchanged knowing glances. Eleanor felt the flush creep up her neck, but she straightened her shoulders, refusing to cower. Her grip tightened on the gift. A special edition comic book Leo had been coveting. The guard, now thoroughly confused but compelled by Serena's authority, gently placed a hand on Eleanor's arm. "Ma'am, please, if you could just—" Eleanor allowed herself to be guided, her eyes scanning the room for Leo. There he was, a blur of red and blue, dressed in a miniature Superman costume, laughing as he chased a balloon. He was so utterly oblivious. So joyful. The sight was a dagger to her heart, but it also fueled a slow, burning resolve. She had to give him his gift. "Wait," Eleanor pleaded, her voice quiet but firm. "I just want to give Leo his birthday present." She held out the wrapped package. Serena finally turned, a faint, condescending smile playing on her lips. "Don't bother, Eleanor. This isn't your kind of place. These aren't your kind of people. He has enough already." Her eyes swept over Eleanor's conservative dress, lingering on her sensible shoes, a silent judgment that spoke volumes. As Eleanor was led towards the main entrance, her gaze caught her son, Julian. He stood by the bar, his head thrown back in laughter, a glass of champagne in hand, chatting animatedly with two distinguished-looking men. His back was to her, his posture relaxed, entirely engrossed in his conversation. He didn't see her. He didn't know. Or perhaps, worse, he simply didn't care. The thought was a raw, aching wound. The cold Chicago air hit her as she was ushered out, the distant sounds of laughter and music from the party fading behind her. Serena's parting words, delivered with a casual shrug to a departing guest, drifted on the wind. Some people just don't know their place. Eleanor walked across the sprawling valet lot, the meticulously polished luxury cars glinting under the afternoon sun. She found her unassuming 2015 Honda Civic, a stark contrast to the gleaming Teslas and Mercedes surrounding it. Sliding into the driver's seat, she placed Leo's unopened gift carefully on the passenger seat. She didn't start the engine immediately. Instead, she sat in the quiet hum of the cooling car, the bitter taste of public humiliation heavy in her mouth. Her fingers, adorned only by a simple gold wedding band, tapped rhythmically on the steering wheel. She closed her eyes for a moment, picturing Serena's cruel smile, Julian's oblivious laughter. They thought she was just an inconvenient, slightly embarrassing relic. A tacky old woman, who occasionally showed up uninvited. What they didn't know, couldn't fathom, was the extent of their delusion. Eleanor Vance was not just Leo's grandmother. She was the quiet, formidable force behind Wellington Industries, the multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that, among its vast holdings, owned the very investment firm that employed Julian, the luxury resort where Serena frequently vacationed, and the trust funds that financed their entire ridiculously extravagant lifestyle. The grand Chicago venue they had rented for Leo's party, Wellington Industries owned the catering company that supplied it. The subtle slights from Serena, the thinly veiled condescension, the gradual chipping away at her self-worth, had been a constant hum for years. Julian's increasing distance, his easy acceptance of his wife's casual cruelty, had been a slower, more insidious poison. But today, under the glittering chandeliers, in front of strangers and her own son, the line had been crossed. This was no longer just about hurt feelings. This was a deliberate, public assault on her dignity. The memory of Arthur, her late husband, flickered in her mind. 15 years ago, after he died, Eleanor had taken the helm of Wellington, transforming his moderately successful manufacturing company into a global powerhouse. She had done it for Arthur, for Julian, and for her own quiet strength. She had worked relentlessly, often sacrificing her public image for privacy, her personal comfort for strategic advantage, and all the while, she had funded Julian's aspirations, supported Serena's whims, hoping, foolishly perhaps, that they would one day see beyond the simple facade she chose to present. She opened her eyes, a cold, hard glint replacing the earlier pain. The elegant blue dress no longer felt simple. It felt like armor. Tomorrow, the world would learn that Eleanor Vance was not a tacky old woman. Tomorrow, Wellington Industries would undergo very necessary organizational changes. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about reclaiming her place, her worth, and making sure that those who benefited from her generosity understood the true cost of their contempt. This was war. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon, casting long, pale shadows across Eleanor Vance's quiet suburban street. It was 6 a.m., and a peculiar calm filled her small home office. The room was neat, functional, filled with sturdy, comfortable furniture. No designer pieces, no expensive art, just a solid oak desk, a well-worn leather chair, and shelves lined with business journals and a handful of framed photographs. One particular photo stood out, a faded image of a younger Eleanor, radiant and hopeful, holding the hand of a beaming Arthur, with a tiny Julian perched on his shoulders. That was 43 years ago. Arthur's death had been sudden, brutal. One moment, he was there, full of life and dreams for their small family. The next, he was gone, leaving Eleanor with a 3-year-old Julian, a mountain of grief, and a mere $57 in her savings account. There was no inheritance, no safety net, just the sheer, terrifying necessity of survival. She remembered those early days with a vivid clarity that still pricked her heart. Nights spent hunched over ledgers, scrubbing floors in empty office buildings, cleaning toilets in corporate suites, while Julian slept at Mrs. Lee's, their kind, elderly neighbor. By day, she devoured every book she could find on business management, real estate, and finance. Her hands were often chapped from the harsh cleaning chemicals, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, but her mind was alight with purpose. Every dollar earned was meticulously accounted for, every spare cent reinvested. She bought her first small commercial property, a rundown strip mall, with an almost reckless audacity, then poured every ounce of her energy into its renovation and management. It was a slow, arduous climb. But climb she did. From that humble beginning, Wellington Industries had grown, not into a mere success, but into a quiet behemoth. $42 million in assets, spread across commercial real estate, corporate services, and a diversified portfolio of smaller, profitable ventures. It was an empire forged in silence, built brick by painful brick. Eleanor had deliberately kept her ownership a profound secret from Julian. She had wanted him to earn his own way, to forge his own path without the crushing weight or complacent comfort of knowing he had a financial superpower at his back. She wanted him to experience the satisfaction of genuine achievement, untainted by privilege. So, she continued to live modestly, driving her practical Honda Civic, shopping at the same discount stores, tending her small garden. Her company provided for hundreds of families, including her own, yet she remained an enigma, a simple woman in a world of complex wealth. When Julian graduated from university with a business degree, Eleanor, through her extensive network, subtly ensured he had an opening in Wellington Industries' management training program. It was an entry based entirely on his academic merit and a series of rigorous interviews, not on any family connection. She watched him climb, from an eager junior analyst to a respected manager in the corporate services division, a pillar of the very company he never knew she owned. She felt a deep, quiet pride, seeing him flourish in the environment she had created. He was a good man, she had thought, capable and driven. Then Serena entered their lives, beautiful, poised, and utterly ruthless in her social ambition. From their very first meeting, Serena made it unequivocally clear that Eleanor wasn't good enough for the affluent, sophisticated family she envisioned for herself and Julian. The comments started subtly, a raised eyebrow at Eleanor's simple home decor, a backhanded compliment about her quaint clothes. "Oh, mother, that dress is a classic," Serena would say, her tone suggesting outdated and cheap. Or, "Are you sure Leo will be comfortable at your house? It's so minimal. We're used to having staff, you know." The insinuations about Eleanor's lack of sophistication, her supposed inability to provide a truly suitable environment for Leo, stung deeply. But what truly twisted the knife was Julian's transformation. Her son, her intelligent, kind Julian, began to grow distant. He stopped calling as often. When Serena made her cutting remarks, Julian would simply look away, offer a weak, non-committal grunt, or, worst of all, simply join in her dismissive laughter. The embarrassment on his face, the way he would subtly try to distance himself from her in public, became a gaping wound in Eleanor's heart. He never once defended her, never once said, "Stop, Serena, she's my mother." The breaking point, before yesterday's public humiliation, had been Christmas dinner last year. Eleanor had lovingly prepared her famous pecan pie. A family tradition, Serena had ostentatiously brought a gourmet dessert from a high-end patisserie, placing it front and center, while Eleanor's pie was relegated to a forgotten corner of the counter. Later, Eleanor overheard Serena discussing future holiday plans with Julian, explicitly stating, "We really should just celebrate with my side of the family next year. Darling, it's just easier." Julian's response? A passive, "Whatever you think is best, dear." It wasn't just exclusion, it was erasure. They were actively writing her out of their lives, using the very money she had earned to build the comfortable world they now inhabited. Yesterday's indignity at Leo's party, however, was a different beast altogether. To be treated like an unwanted intruder, dismissed as tacky old woman in a language chosen specifically to wound, and then escorted out like a criminal that was a step too far. It was a declaration of war, a blatant disrespect that could not be ignored. Eleanor took a deep, steadying breath. She pressed a button on her desk phone, connecting to her private line. She knew Serena and Julian were still blissfully asleep, dreaming their extravagant dreams, utterly oblivious to the quiet storm brewing. Eleanor Vance, the tacky old woman, was about to shake their world to its foundations. She had waited long enough. It was time for the organizational changes. The organizational charts spread across Eleanor's expansive digital screen. A meticulously structured web of names and departments, she navigated through the complex hierarchy with practiced ease, her gaze stopping on two particular names, Julian Vance, Serena Hayes. Her son, her daughter-in-law. Both were situated high enough to enjoy significant influence and impressive salaries, yet low enough to be mere cogs in the colossal machine that was Wellington Industries. They reported up through several layers of management, each layer ultimately leading back to one person. Her, the tacky old woman they had summarily ejected from Leo's party. The irony was a bitter, satisfying taste in her mouth. Neither of them had any inkling, not the slightest suspicion that the woman they so casually dismissed held the reins of their entire professional existence. Eleanor reached for her desk phone, her movements precise. She dialed a number she knew by heart, a private line that bypassed all corporate switchboards. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Crisp and alert, even at this early hour. Daniel Lee, the voice stated. Daniel, Eleanor replied, her voice steady, cool as a winter morning. It's Eleanor. It's time to make some changes. There was a beat of silence on the other end, a knowing pause. Daniel Lee, Mrs. Lee's son, was her executive vice president, her most trusted confidant. He was one of the very few people who knew the truth of her identity, the full scope of her ownership, and the decades of quiet sacrifices that had built Wellington Industries. He had seen her rise from the ground up, just as his mother had seen Julian grow from a boy to a man. Understood, Eleanor, Daniel said, his voice calm, but with an underlying current of gravity. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Have the conference room ready. 20 minutes later, Daniel, a man in his late 50s with kind eyes and a sharp mind, sat across from Eleanor in the private conference room adjacent to her office. It was a space rarely used, reserved for the most sensitive and strategic discussions. Are you sure about this, Eleanor? Daniel asked, his gaze earnest. He knew her well enough to understand the depth of the betrayal she must have felt. This is going to change everything. Eleanor nodded, her expression resolute. I am sure, Daniel. More sure than I've been about anything in a long time. She gestured to the two employee files open on the table between them. She picked up Julian's file first. Julian Vance, she read aloud, though she knew the contents intimately. Regional Manager, Corporate Services Division, annual salary, $127,000. Performance review. Exceeds expectations. Well-regarded, good rapport with staff. Solid work ethic. She paused, her eyes lingering on Julian's confident smile in his employee photo. He was a good manager. He simply hadn't been a good son lately. Then she picked up Serena's file. Serena Hayes, Marketing Director, same division. Annual salary, $118,000. Performance review. Meets expectations with room for growth. Creative, but occasionally lacks follow-through. Delegates effectively. Eleanor almost scoffed at that last part. Serena delegated everything. They made their choice, Daniel, Eleanor stated, her voice devoid of emotion now. I spent 43 years building this company, not just for myself, but for Julian. For his future. I sacrificed. I worked. I kept my identity a secret so he could find his own way, build his own success, and in return, he allowed his wife to systematically erase me from his life, to humiliate me publicly. Even as they benefited from everything I built, Daniel listened, his expression somber. He knew the story. The decades of quiet support and unspoken disappointment. So, here's the plan, Eleanor continued, her tone crisp, professional. Wellington Industries is implementing a new efficiency initiative. We're going to be streamlining operations and eliminating redundancies across various departments. She used air quotes around the corporate buzzwords, a faint, dry humor in her eyes. Specifically, Effective Monday morning, Julian Vance will be transferred from his position as regional manager to building maintenance coordinator for our downtown Chicago corporate office. His new annual salary will be $42,000. Daniel's eyebrows shot up. The reduction was severe. $42,000. Eleanor, that's a significant drop. Market rates for maintenance coordination. Daniel. Eleanor replied, her voice cool, impenetrable. He'll be responsible for overseeing the daily upkeep, minor repairs, coordinating with external vendors for larger issues. A hands-on role. She even managed a faint, ironic smile. And Serena? Daniel asked, bracing himself. Serena Hayes will be moved from marketing director to facilities support specialist for the same corporate office, Eleanor stated, her voice unwavering. Her new annual salary will be $38,000. She'll be assisting Julian, handling procurement for cleaning supplies, managing inventory, scheduling, and ensuring the common areas are always presentable. Daniel let out a slow breath. They'll still have jobs, he observed. And benefits. Exactly, Eleanor confirmed. This isn't about career destruction, Daniel. It's about repositioning. They will still be employed by Wellington Industries, with full benefits. They just won't have the accustomed salaries, or the lavish lifestyle those salaries afforded them. No more designer clothes, no more exclusive club memberships, no more international vacations, and certainly no more grand birthday parties at the peninsula. Eleanor leaned forward, her gaze intense. I scrubbed floors, Daniel. I cleaned toilets to build this. They need to understand what real work looks like. They need to learn humility. It's a lesson they have studiously avoided their entire lives, and they will learn it within the very company they unknowingly disparaged. The changes are to take effect Monday morning, she concluded, her voice firm. I want it to be a complete surprise. No leaks, no warnings. Just the new assignments waiting for them when they arrive. Daniel nodded slowly, a faint smile touching his lips. Consider it done, Eleanor. Monday morning it is. The weekend that followed Leo's party and Eleanor's decisive meeting with Daniel felt impossibly long. Her small, quiet house seemed to amplify the silence, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the ghosts of her past. She found herself drifting through the living room, her gaze falling on framed photographs that dotted the shelves. There was Julian, a gap-toothed boy in a Little League uniform, smiling proudly after hitting a home run. Another showed him in his cap and gown, beaming on his high school graduation day. Each image was a testament to years of unseen effort, sacrifices she had gladly made. She remembered working double shifts to afford his Little League fees, picking up extra cleaning jobs to ensure he had the best cap and gown for graduation, even though he never knew. She thought of the substantial college fund she had meticulously built, supplementing the small scholarships he earned, always making sure he had everything he needed without ever revealing the true source. And for Leo, her beloved grandson, she had established a trust fund that would secure his future. A secret well-guarded, meant as a legacy of love. The irony of it all, that she had been working tirelessly for their comfort and future, only to be deemed tacky and excluded, was a bitter pill. Sunday night, sleep proved elusive. Eleanor lay awake in the pre-dawn darkness, the quiet hum of her home a stark contrast to the storm she knew would soon erupt. She pictured Julian and Serena, likely enjoying a final, indulgent weekend, utterly oblivious to the seismic shift about to rock their carefully constructed world. A part of her, the old Eleanor, felt a pang of something akin to regret, a fleeting wish that things could have been different, but that part was quickly silenced by the sharp, lingering memory of Serena's sneering face, Julian's absent gaze, and the cold sting of humiliation in the hotel parking lot. Monday morning arrived, cloaked in a gray, drizzling rain that matched the somber mood of the impending corporate upheaval. At precisely 9 a.m., Daniel Lee, with Eleanor's explicit instruction, released the company-wide memo. Subject: Important organizational restructuring. It was terse, professional, announcing a new efficiency initiative and a strategic realignment of personnel to optimize operations. It vaguely hinted at new roles and responsibilities to be communicated individually. Then, at 9:30 a.m., the targeted emails hit. individual notifications, sent to each affected employee, outlining their new positions, reporting structures, and, most importantly, their revised compensation packages. Eleanor sat in her elegant, minimalist office on the 42nd floor, a cup of herbal tea steaming beside her, waiting. She knew the timeline. She knew the sequence of events. She knew the initial shock would give way to confusion, then disbelief, and finally, what she privately termed the explosion. At 9:47 a.m., her executive assistant, Sarah, buzzed through. "Eleanor, Julian Vance is on line 3. He sounds quite agitated. He's demanding an immediate meeting about an obvious error in his new assignment." Eleanor took a slow sip of her tea, her gaze fixed on the panoramic view of the Chicago skyline. "Tell Mr. Vance, Sarah, that all decisions regarding the recent restructuring are final and have been approved by ownership. He should direct any inquiries to his new direct supervisor, Mr. Peterson, in facilities management." "Understood, Eleanor," Sarah replied, her voice tinged with surprise. Sarah was accustomed to Julian Vance having direct access, even if she didn't know the true family connection. 23 minutes later, the intercom buzzed again. "Eleanor, Serena Hayes is on line 2. She's demanding to speak with someone in authority immediately. She's using terms like unacceptable and discriminatory changes." Eleanor exhaled softly. "Give her the same message, Sarah. All decisions are final. She reports to Mr. Vance, her new direct supervisor." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Eleanor's lips at the thought of Serena reporting to Julian. By 10:30 a.m., Eleanor's voicemail began to fill. Frantic messages from Julian, then Serena, followed by a flurry of increasingly desperate calls and emails to various higher-ranking executives within Wellington. They were trying to reverse what they clearly perceived as a catastrophic mistake, a bureaucratic error that could be easily corrected by someone with enough power. What they didn't understand, couldn't possibly fathom, was that there was no one higher than her, and this was no mistake. It was a meticulously planned, carefully executed decision. At noon, Daniel called. "Julian just left my office," he reported, his voice tinged with a mix of awe and concern. "He looked like he'd been hit by a truck, said it must be some kind of administrative error, an oversight. Asked how this could possibly happen. If there's an appeal process." Eleanor's grip tightened on her phone. She recalled her own humiliation in the parking lot. The sting of Serena's Portuguese insults. Julian's uncaring back. "And what did you tell him?" "Daniel, I explained that the decisions came directly from ownership, with absolute authority, and that there was no appeal. I also gently reminded him that all work, including maintenance, is valued work within Wellington Industries, essential to our operations." Daniel paused. He just stared at me, Eleanor. Absolutely speechless. He still has no idea. Eleanor felt a fresh wave of resolve. "Good, Daniel. That's exactly how it should be." The rain outside intensified, a drumming against her window. But inside, Eleanor felt a quiet, powerful calm. The tremors had begun. If you're finding this story as gripping as I hope, please make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more. Your support means the world to me as I share this journey. The aftermath of Monday's restructuring memo was a predictable cascade of chaos from Julian and Serena's end. Daniel called Eleanor again in the early afternoon, a wry amusement in his voice. "Serena is not handling it well, Eleanor," he reported. "She's calling it a vendetta, swearing she'll destroy whoever is responsible for this." Eleanor couldn't help but feel a flicker of grim satisfaction. Serena was right, of course. It was absolutely a vendetta. Deeply personal, precisely calibrated. The exquisite irony was that Serena was looking for a shadowy corporate enemy. A jealous rival. A faceless decision-maker. Never suspecting the true architect of her downfall was the tacky old woman she'd had escorted from her grandson's party. By 2 p.m., the corporate grapevine was humming. News reached Eleanor's office that Julian and Serena had spent their lunch hour sequestered in a private booth at a nearby cafe. Phones pressed to their ears, frantically calling headhunters and competing firms. They believed this was a temporary setback, a bad dream from which they would soon wake to new, better opportunities. An hour later, by 3 p.m., Daniel confirmed they had elevated their complaints. They've submitted formal grievances to HR. Eleanor, he informed her, alleging obvious discrimination and unfair targeting. Eleanor merely hummed in response. HR would follow protocol, investigate, and ultimately find no grounds. As every decision was legally sound and tied to a legitimate business restructuring, then, at 4 p.m., Daniel called with another update. They're inquiring about severance packages now, he said, a hint of concern in his tone, threatening to leave Wellington Industries if their old positions aren't reinstated. And what did you tell them? Eleanor asked, her voice calm. I reiterated company policy, Daniel replied smoothly. Employees who resign voluntarily forfeit any severance package. Furthermore, Wellington Industries does not provide positive references for voluntary departures, only for those who are let go under specific circumstances or for those who move on after a period of mutual agreement and strong performance. Eleanor felt a silent understanding pass between them. Daniel knew her game, and he was playing it perfectly. She was trapping them. Their demotion, now part of their official internal record, combined with the lack of positive references, would make it nearly impossible for them to find equivalent, high-paying jobs in their respective fields. They were boxed in. To leave was to jump into a financial abyss. To stay was to swallow their pride and live with the consequences of their actions. Daniel continued. Julian apparently asked if someone was trying to push them out. He genuinely seemed bewildered. And your response? Eleanor prompted. I simply told him that Wellington Industries values all its employees, and that these new roles are crucial to our new efficiency initiative, and that we expected them to adapt and perform. Eleanor ended the call, a deep breath filling her lungs. As she left the office, the city lights beginning to twinkle against the darkening sky. She drove a slightly circuitous route home. She found herself driving past Julian and Serena's luxurious apartment building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in one of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhoods. She imagined the designer furniture, the expensive art, the sweeping views they enjoyed. Her mind began to calculate. How long could they maintain that lifestyle on a combined annual salary of $80,000? The answer was not long, 3 months perhaps, before the pressure became unbearable. She thought of Leo, her sweet, innocent grandson. He was probably oblivious to the seismic shifts occurring in his parents' world. Soon, perhaps, he would move from that opulent apartment to a more modest rental, a smaller school, a simpler life, a life, perhaps, more grounded in reality, much like the one Eleanor herself had built, pulling into her own modest driveway, the familiar comfort of her small, well-tended garden surrounding her. Eleanor felt a sense of control, a quiet power she hadn't felt since Arthur's death. The weight of invisible burdens, of unappreciated sacrifices, was slowly lifting. 3.5 weeks later, the new roles had settled into a strained routine. Julian and Serena were still employed, still showing up, albeit with markedly less enthusiasm. The initial flurry of complaints and job searches had died down, replaced by a sullen acceptance, or perhaps, a desperate clinging to the only jobs they could get. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, Sarah's voice buzzed through the intercom, laced with a hint of bewildered amusement. Eleanor. Serena Martinez is in the lobby. She's requesting a personal meeting with Mrs. Wellington. Eleanor's breath caught. Mrs. Wellington. It was a name she hadn't heard in years, a title associated with her late husband, a relic of a time before her own quiet takeover. It was a faint, almost forgotten echo of her identity, carefully separated from the public persona of Eleanor Vance, CEO. Serena must have been digging deep, grasping at straws, trying to find some higher power, some old guard, who might sympathize with her plight. Send her up, Sarah, Eleanor instructed, her voice steady despite the sudden surge of adrenaline. She looked around her office, at the understated elegance, the subtle indicators of immense wealth and power. The custom-built desk, the original artworks, the expansive views, a stark, blinding contrast to Serena's perception of tacky old Eleanor. The stage was set. The door to Eleanor's office opened, and Sarah, her expression carefully neutral, ushered Serena Hayes into the room. Serena entered with a practiced poise, a ghost of her former self. She was still undeniably beautiful. Her expensive hair perfectly coiffed, her makeup artfully applied, but the designer silk jumpsuit was gone, replaced by a tailored skirt and blouse that, while professional, clearly belonged to an older wardrobe. A stark contrast to the effortless luxury she usually exuded. There was a visible tension in her shoulders, a brittle edge to her smile, betraying the immense stress she was under. Serena extended a manicured hand, her smile widening artificially. "Mrs. Wellington, thank you so much for seeing me. I truly appreciate you taking the time." Eleanor remained seated behind her imposing desk, her expression unreadable. She made no move to shake Serena's hand, nor did she offer her a seat. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, as Serena's outstretched hand slowly retracted. "Miss Martinez," Eleanor finally said, her voice cool, measured. "What can I do for you?" Her gaze was a cold, assessing sweep, taking in every detail of Serena's strained demeanor. Serena cleared her throat, her eyes flickering nervously around the opulent office, obviously trying to gauge the power dynamic. "I wanted to discuss the recent organizational changes. I believe there's been some kind of misunderstanding regarding my qualifications, my value to Wellington Industries. My husband, Julian, feels the same way about his reassignment. Misunderstanding?" Eleanor's tone was neutral, devoid of warmth. "Are there performance issues in your current position, Miss Martinez?" "As facilities support specialist," Serena faltered, her carefully constructed composure slipping. No, of course not. I'm doing what's required. I'm fulfilling my duties." She straightened, regaining a sliver of her former assertiveness. "But with my MBA, my 8 years of marketing management experience, the 23% increase in departmental efficiency I achieved last year," Eleanor leaned back in her chair, a silent, unblinking study of the woman before her. Serena, still completely oblivious, talked on, her voice growing increasingly desperate as she recited her accolades, convinced that logic and a strong resume would prevail. She saw Eleanor Vance, the CEO's assistant or confidant perhaps, but never the owner, never the true power. "Miss Martinez," Eleanor interrupted, her voice a soft, almost imperceptible whisper that nevertheless cut through Serena's monologue. "Personnel decisions at Wellington Industries are based on current business needs and strategic goals. While your past performance was, as you describe, adequate, it does not inherently entitle you to a specific position within the company. We staff where we believe the greatest need exists." Serena's brittle smile finally cracked, her eyes narrowed, and a flash of anger broke through her polished facade. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her voice rising. "Someone obviously has it out for me and my husband. This isn't about business restructuring. This is personal. You can't tell me our entire careers are being dismantled because of business needs." Eleanor felt a wave of cold, quiet satisfaction. Serena was right, of course. It was intensely personal. But she was flailing in the dark, searching for a phantom enemy in the corporate shadows, never realizing the enemy was sitting right in front of her. "Regardless of your personal feelings, Miss Martinez," Eleanor continued, her voice still a whisper, carrying an unspoken weight. "Ownership has absolute authority in these matters. If you are unsatisfied with your current role or compensation, you are, of course, free to seek employment elsewhere." Desperation, raw and undisguised, seeped into Serena's voice. "We've tried," she admitted, the words tumbling out. "We've applied everywhere, but every opportunity, every interview, every offer, it just mysteriously disappears, as if someone is sabotaging us." She stared at Eleanor, her eyes wide, searching for a hint of complicity, a flicker of recognition. Eleanor maintained her cool, detached facade. "I have no knowledge of such matters, Miss Martinez. Wellington Industries wishes all its former employees well in their future endeavors, but we do not interfere with other companies' hiring processes. It was a subtle, cruel lie of omission, delivered with perfect sincerity. Serena stared at Eleanor, her mind clearly racing, trying to put the pieces of an invisible puzzle together. The woman before her was calm, poised, powerful. Yet she was also Eleanor Vance, the tacky old woman who cleaned her own house, the grandmother they had dismissed. The disconnect was too vast for Serena to bridge. "Is there anything else, Miss Martinez?" Eleanor asked, a clear dismissal in her tone. But Leo," Serena stammered, clutching at the last straw. "Our responsibilities to our son. How are we supposed to maintain our lives, give him what he needs?" Eleanor finally met Serena's gaze directly, her eyes sharp and unyielding, reflecting the pain of Leo's party. The woman who had humiliated her, who had treated her with such contempt, now stood before her, pleading. "Sometimes, Miss Martinez," Eleanor said, her voice now dangerously low, almost a murmur, "people create their own consequences. Sometimes the universe has a way of teaching us lessons." Serena's jaw tightened. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came. Eleanor simply nodded towards the door. Sarah, who had been discreetly waiting, stepped forward. As Sarah began to escort Serena out, Serena paused at the doorway, turning back, her eyes burning with a desperate, furious resolve. "This isn't over," she vowed, her voice tight with suppressed rage. "I'm going to find out who's behind this. And when I do," Eleanor simply watched her go. A quiet, almost serene smile touching her lips. Serena still had no idea. Eleanor sat in the hushed silence of her office, the city skyline stretching out beyond her window, a sprawling testament to ambition and power. She saw her reflection in the glass, a woman of unassuming elegance, yet behind her eyes, she was Norma Wellington, the quiet force, the owner of a $42 million empire. The name N. Wellington was a carefully crafted alias, a professional shield, a nod to her late husband Arthur. She knew that even in her own company, few connected Eleanor Vance's to the mysterious N. Wellington, who held the ultimate authority. Her evening commute often took her past the luxury apartment building where Julian and Serena once lived. The lights in their old unit were dark, a "for rent" sign discreetly displayed. She had learned through discreet inquiries that they had moved to a modest two-bedroom rental on the outskirts of the city. Her grandson, Leo, would now have to share a room, a stark contrast to the sprawling nursery and playroom he once enjoyed. The absence of their former privileged lifestyle, the quiet downgrade, was undeniable. Eleanor wondered, with a detached curiosity, how long it would take them to truly connect the dots, to realize that the comfortable, gilded life they'd enjoyed had been entirely built upon her silent sacrifices and immense success. 2 months crawled by. 2 months of Julian overseeing cleaning crews and minor repairs, 2 months of Serena ordering toilet paper and scheduling window washing, both existing in the corporate world they despised, yet couldn't escape. Then, the phone rang. It was Julian, the first time he had called her directly since Leo's birthday party. His voice, when she answered, sounded hollow, bone-weary, devoid of its usual confident cadence. "Mom," he began, the single word cutting through the careful distance that had grown between them. "Everything is falling apart." Eleanor remained silent, listening. She kept her own voice neutral, an even keel against the rising tide of his distress. He spoke of his demotion to maintenance, the mind-numbing tasks, the casual disrespect from former colleagues who now outranked him. He spoke of Serena's humiliation, basically being a janitor, he said, the words laced with disgust and pity. He detailed their struggles to live on a combined $80,000 a year. The shock of it, the constant anxiety. He mentioned the move, the shame of leaving their luxurious home, and the ignominy of selling Serena's cherished luxury car just to make ends meet. "No one at the company gives us straight answers, Mom," Julian continued, his voice laced with confusion. "They just say, ownership decisions and streamlining. And every time we get close to a new job, a good lead, it just vanishes, like thin air. It's like someone is actively working against us." Eleanor listened, her heart aching when he spoke of Leo. "Leo is so confused, Mom. He misses his big room, his friends, He keeps asking why we don't go to the club anymore. He's just sad. The impact on her grandson was a sting, a reminder of the innocent collateral damage in this carefully orchestrated lesson. Julian, Eleanor said softly, her voice carrying a gentle suggestion. Perhaps this is an opportunity to reassess what's really important in life. There was a pause, a moment of silence on the line. Then, Julian's voice, raw and vulnerable, returned. Mom, he said, why didn't you defend me at the party, when she was like that? Why didn't you say anything? His voice cracked slightly. I was such a coward, Mom. I was ashamed of myself. Not of you. Serena convinced me that we were better than our roots, and I let her push you away. I let her make you feel small. And I hate myself for it. Eleanor closed her eyes, a sigh escaping her lips. The confession, belated as it was a balm to a long-festering wound. Then, Julian shifted, his tone changing, a new intensity in his voice. Mom, I've been doing some research. He paused, as if gathering his thoughts. About Wellington Industries, the ownership, it's so secretive. Everyone just talks about ownership, but there's no public CEO, no clear board chairman. It's all managed through trusts and shell corporations. Eleanor held her breath, but I dug deeper. Julian pressed on, his voice gaining momentum. Found some old records. The company was originally founded 43 years ago. By an N. Wellington. No first name, just an initial. And a few things kept popping up. Wellington Industries has a long-standing, very quiet, scholarship program for children of single mothers. Very generous, and the employee benefits, even for entry-level positions, are surprisingly robust, almost altruistic. He continued, his voice a tremor of dawning realization. And the timing. Mom. 43 years ago, when Dad died, and all the times in my life, when I needed something, a scholarship, a little extra for a school trip, when that house burned down, and we suddenly had enough for a new one, there were always these anonymous financial windfalls. I never questioned them. I just assumed they were luck. Or some distant relative. Julian's voice was shaking now, filled with a mixture of awe, horror, and a profound, dawning understanding. N. Wellington, he whispered. Eleanor Vance. Then, the question hung in the air, a delicate, earth-shattering accusation, a plea for truth. Mom, he asked, his voice barely audible. Are you Mrs. Ann Wellington? The world seemed to hold its breath. A long, profound silence stretched between Eleanor and Julian, the telephone line, a fragile bridge across 43 years of carefully constructed secrets. 43 years of Eleanor living two lives, one as the modest, unassuming mother, the other as the formidable, unseen matriarch of a sprawling empire. All of it, in that single moment, crumbled. Yes, Eleanor whispered, the word barely audible, yet resonating with the weight of decades. It was a simple confirmation, an answer to Julian's desperate, halting question. Are you Mrs. Ann Wellington? On the other end of the line, Julian's breath hitched. Oh my God, he breathed, his voice barely audible, filled with an uncomprehending shock. Mom. Oh my God. The realization must have hit him with the force of a physical blow, the magnitude of her deception, the scale of her power, and the terrifying truth that the person they had been complaining to, demanding answers from, was the very architect of their unraveling. He stammered, his words disjointed. You own Wellington Industries? You own the company? So, the restructuring, the demotions, the blacklisting, the systematic dismantling of everything we built, that was all you? Eleanor sat perfectly still in her modest kitchen, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across her worn countertop. Yes, Julian, she confirmed, her voice now calm, steady, and utterly devoid of remorse. It was all me. Another long silence ensued, thicker, heavier than the last. The air thrummed with unspoken accusations, with the echoes of 1,000 forgotten slights, 1,000 unacknowledged sacrifices. Why? Julian finally asked, his voice broken in a new, profound way. It wasn't the angry, demanding why of a spoiled man, but the shattered plea of a child who had just realized the depth of his trespass. Eleanor took a deep breath. The answer, a torrent of suppressed pain and resentment that now, finally, could be unleashed. Because, Julian, she began, her voice gaining strength, you let your wife have me thrown out of my grandson's birthday party like I was garbage. You stood there, laughing with your important guests, while Serena called me a tacky old woman in front of everyone, and had me escorted out of the building. Your son, Julian, your own mother, she continued, the words flowing now, each one a sharp blade of memory. That was merely the final insult, Julian. For years, you allowed Serena to treat me like an embarrassment. My home wasn't good enough. My clothes weren't good enough. I wasn't sophisticated enough for her perfect, affluent family. And you, my son, always chose her. You never once defended me. You never once stood up for me. You just let her push me further and further away, until I was nothing more than an inconvenient shadow. Julian began to sob, soft, choked sounds on the other end of the line. Mom, I had no idea. About the company. About any of it. I swear. Serena. She just made me believe you were just a poor old woman. Struggling. Needing us to take care of you. She made me ashamed. Mom. And I went along with it. Why didn't you ever tell me? He choked out, the question laced with a desperate regret. Eleanor's voice softened slightly, a hint of the old, loving mother resurfacing, yet tempered with unwavering resolve. I wanted you to make your own way, Julian. To earn your success. To develop character, not complacency. I wanted you to build something with your own hands. To know the value of hard work, without the crushing burden or the easy comfort of family wealth. Instead, Julian confessed, his voice thick with tears, I developed arrogance and cruelty. I forgot my roots. I forgot who raised me. I forgot everything you taught me. Eleanor listened to the soft sobs echoing through the phone, so reminiscent of the hurts of his childhood, the innocent cries she had always rushed to comfort. This time, she simply waited. I know you are sorry, Julian, she said, finally. What happens now, Mom? He asked, the question laced with renewed fear. Are you going to destroy us completely? Eleanor looked around her modest kitchen, at the worn wooden table, the familiar scent of old cookbooks, the intense anger she had harbored for months, years even, began to recede, replaced by something far more complex, a mixture of pain, hope, and a weary, enduring love. That depends, Julian, she finally said, her voice softer, but no less firm. That depends on whether you've really learned what I was trying to teach you. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. I need to know that you understand the true meaning of love, of family, of respect. That it is unconditional, Julian. It isn't dependent on social status, or the size of a bank account, or what kind of car you drive. It's about how you treat people. Especially your own. Julian's response was immediate, fervent. I understand, Mom. I swear I do. And I'll make sure Serena understands too. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Eleanor smiled. A genuine, heartfelt smile that reached her eyes. Her son, her lost Julian, was finally coming home. 3 weeks had passed since Julian's revelation, a period of profound quiet on Eleanor's part, allowing the truth to settle. Daniel Lee had discreetly delivered Julian and Serena's formal apologies. Julian's was a 3-page, handwritten letter, raw with regret and astonishing in its self-awareness. He detailed a long-standing pattern of prioritizing superficial social status over the very real bonds of family, admitting his failure to defend her, and outlining his earnest desire to teach Leo about true love, respect, and the importance of being proud of his grandmother. Serena's letter, however, was a terse, 1-page typed note, couched in corporate jargon. It apologized for any misunderstandings and inappropriate actions, carefully sidestepping a full admission of her cruelty. Eleanor read it, a faint sigh escaping her lips. Perhaps that was enough for now, she thought, for a starting point. She scheduled a meeting with Julian only. The next day, Julian entered her office. He was noticeably thinner, and streaks of gray now seemed more prominent in his hair. He wore the standard blue shirt and sensible trousers of his maintenance uniform, a far cry from his previous tailored suits. But what truly struck Eleanor was the humility in his posture, the desperate hope mixed with vulnerability in his eyes. "Mom," he said softly, the single word carrying the ghost of the little boy she once knew. He looked around the opulent office, the very space he had unwittingly passed by for years. "I can't believe I've been working in your building all this time and never knew." His voice was filled with a bewildered wonder. Eleanor gestured to the chair opposite her. "I wanted you to succeed on your own merit, Julian," she reiterated. The familiar reason for her secrecy. He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I know, but I see now that I succeeded because of your hidden opportunities, your unwavering love, not just my own merit. I've been reflecting, Mom, about Dad's death, your sacrifices, those night shifts, the clean hands that brought in every penny for my future." He paused, his gaze meeting hers, full of anguish. "I let Serena convince me you were holding us back, that your modest lifestyle was embarrassing. I started seeing you through her eyes, Mom, instead of remembering the woman who built everything for me." Julian confessed his own deep-seated insecurity about his humble beginnings and how Serena had made him feel sophisticated, fearing that acknowledging his true roots would somehow diminish his achievements. His words were a mirror, reflecting the exact patterns of behavior Eleanor had observed for years. Her anger, sharp and burning for so long, began to dissolve into a profound, weary understanding. "So," Eleanor said, her voice gentle, "what do you want now, Julian?" He didn't hesitate. "I want my mother back," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want Leo to know his grandmother, the real one. I want to rebuild what I destroyed." He then spoke of Serena. "She's struggling, Mom, really struggling, but she's willing to try. And my relationship with you. It's no longer conditional on Serena's approval." Eleanor felt a shift within her, a quiet unfolding. "I won't restore your old positions, Julian," she stated, her voice firm, "but I will create new opportunities, roles that match your skills and experience, but with conditions. This isn't just about financial recovery. It's about repairing a family." She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small set of keys, placing them on the table. "These are for a 3-bedroom house on Maple Street. It's one of Wellington's investment properties. It's not a luxury apartment, but it's a solid, comfortable home. For Leo's stability, for your fresh start." Julian stared at the keys, his jaw dropping. "Mom, I can't. We can't just take that. It's a loan, Julian," Eleanor insisted gently. "And it comes with a condition. Sunday dinners, every week. Leo, you, and me. We need to rebuild this, brick by brick, just like I built Wellington." She then spoke of Serena. "Serena is welcome when she's ready to be part of a family instead of trying to control it, ready to treat me with respect, not contempt." Julian nodded vigorously. "I'll make her understand, Mom. I promise." "No, Julian," Eleanor corrected, a soft smile touching her lips. "She must choose to understand. Just as you did." Eleanor rose, walked around her desk, and embraced her son. It was a long, heartfelt hug, years of unspoken pain and love flowing between them. "I love you, Julian," she whispered into his hair. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he mumbled, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "So profoundly sorry." 6 months later, the scent of grilling burgers filled the air in the backyard of the modest Maple Street house. Eleanor watched Leo, now 6, chase a ball with an easy joy, calling her abuela, a term of endearment that warmed her to the core. Julian joined her on the porch, a quiet peace emanating from him that she hadn't seen in years. He was now Assistant Director of Employee Relations at Wellington Industries, a role he earned, one focused on the very human connections he had neglected for so long. Serena emerged from the kitchen, a tray of lemonade in hand. She wasn't effusive, still a woman of sharp edges, but she offered Eleanor a tentative smile, her gaze meeting Eleanor's without defiance. She was trying. Small, significant progress. Dad would be proud, wouldn't he? Julian asked, his voice soft. As he watched Leo, Eleanor squeezed his hand. I think he'd be proud that we found our way back to each other, she said. Her voice thick with emotion. She was proud of Julian, of the man he was becoming. Teaching Leo not just about success, but about the bedrock values of family and respect. Julian squeezed her hand back, a silent testament to their renewed bond. Thank you, Mom, he said, for not giving up on me. As darkness settled over the quiet neighborhood, Eleanor felt a profound peace. Not the peace of victory, but of coming home, being valued for who she was, not for what she could provide. The tacky old woman was gone, replaced by Norma Wellington, matriarch of a family that had finally, painfully, learned the true meaning of love and respect.